To help Catch the Fire TV grow and touch more people's lives, please consider giving a financial gift by clicking the icon and choosing Catch the Fire TV in the drop-down. Thank you, and God bless you.
And I want to talk to you today about thankfulness. But how do you remain thankful when life isn't going the way you planned it? So how many of us, by a show of hands, have felt like you've had a moment in your life, a season in your life, and you're like, God, why am I in this place? Why am I here? What's going on? Raise your hand and look around, okay? This means you're not alone, which means God hasn't singled you out. God hasn't left you. It means that us as Christians, all of us go through times and seasons when we're like, why are we here? And that's okay. So if you're in that season right now, it's okay. It's going to be all right. And so we're going to be talking about Jeremiah 29. During the first meeting, I actually forgot to get to like the pinnacle verses 11. So I didn't even mention 11 in the end. So if I don't get to 11, when I finish, can everyone just shout verse 11, okay? You're going to help me. So Jeremiah 29. If you're there, great. I'm going to be reading it out from the NIV, and it says, "This is the text of the letter that the prophet Jeremiah sent from Jerusalem to the surviving elders." Everyone say surviving. "Among the exiles," everyone say exiles. "And to the priests and prophets and all the other people Nebuchadnezzar had carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon." So what was the first word I got you to say? Survivors. So if you're a survivor, what's everyone else? Dead. Yep. So this isn't, thank you, Alice. Alice, that was great. I like participation. So the Israelites have been exiled to Babylon. Exiled means forcefully removed by way of war in losing a war, and removed from your current home and brought into a new city, which is usually the capital city of the opposing nation, so that you are surrounded and you will slowly become infected by their thoughts, their way of life, their currency, their language, everything. Their whole goal is to kill your culture, remove you from what is yours, what feels like home, and make you feel like you're not a part. So that's exile. And surviving means a lot of people had to die. And so if you read earlier on in Jeremiah, you'll see that Judah and Jerusalem, they go to war against Babylon, and Babylon wins. King Nebuchadnezzar wins. And so a lot of people have died, which isn't a happy thought, which means the people that are being exiled, they will have known people, they'll have had family and friends, they'll have their whole life not only ripped away from them, but also they will have known people who have died. They'll have known their friends, their family, their way of life. Everything that they knew will have changed. So, that's not the nicest way to start out Jeremiah 29. They're in Babylon right now, and they're waiting for this letter from Jeremiah. Jeremiah is the prophet of the Lord. Jeremiah is the voice of God. It was, when Jeremiah spoke, it was as if God was speaking directly to them. And so they are literally waiting for this scroll to arrive from Jeremiah, excited about God's plan to restore back the land that Babylon has taken. Verse 2 says, so on top of the elders, priests, and prophets, verse 2 says that the king, the queen mother, the court officials, the leaders of Judah and Jerusalem, the skilled workers, and the artisans had gone into exile from Jerusalem as well. Basically, anyone who's gifted or talented, anyone who's smart, anyone who would raise the thought or the idea of maybe we can just stay in Jerusalem and fight again. Anyone who could build anything, anyone who was creative enough to think differently outside the box, the people who did paintings and art, sculptures, the metal workers, all of the skilled people were flushed from the country so that in Jerusalem, in Judah, there was not enough skill to revolt again. There was not enough power there. There wasn't the people to train them, so they would stay victims. They would stay occupied. That's the whole point of exile, is get people out of their country, exile them to your city, and you're literally going to infect their whole life, everything about them, until they become part of you. And so the people who are exiled, they're waiting for this letter, they're waiting for this prophetic word. And verse 11, I'm just going to read it once, just so I know I've got it, okay? And we all know it. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. So that's a very powerful statement, and we use that a lot, but I think we use it a lot in the wrong context. Because sometimes life doesn't go the way we want it to. Sometimes we look back at the last year, 6 months, 10 years, from some of you more, and go, how did I end up here? How did I end up in this place? How did I end up in this job? How did I end up in these relationships? How did I get here? And so this is what Jeremiah, verse 4 says, this is the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Verse 5, people right now, before I get to it, I'm building this up. I know I'm building this up. People are expecting tomorrow an army will attack Babylon, will kill everyone in Babylon. You will get not only your revenge, but then you'll be able to leave and go back home. If you follow the Old Testament, when Israel gets exiled to different nations, there's always a moment when they rise up and they come back and they take back their land that God had promised them. And so they're waiting. This is the master plan of how they're going to get back home. This is it. And this is the first thing God speaks to them. Build houses and settle down. I don't think this is what they're expecting. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters into marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, Babylon, if the city prospers, you too will prosper. That verse 5, I can tell you now, people were not expecting that. Build houses, build your house, plant a garden, settle down. What they wanted to hear was, God's going to come and destroy these people for robbing you, for taking from you, for killing your friends and family. He is going to destroy them, and you are going to be put back on a pedestal. They were seeking justice. They want justice. They've lost everything, and now they're in this country. And now God's saying to them, well, now that you're here, you might as well build a house. You might as well plant a garden so you have food to eat. You might as well marry your kids off. You might as well settle down like you're going to be here for a while. This was not what the Israelites wanted to hear. The Israelites wanted to hear, I'm going to restore the land that they have taken from you, and I'm going to bless you in your home. It wasn't, I want you to stay in Babylon, stay in the nation that robbed everything from you, stay in the pain and suffering that daily reminds you of all your friends and family you have lost. Stay in a culture that doesn't accept who you are, what you have, or where you're from. Stay. Build houses and settle down. Do you know what's great about living in a house? You can have people over to your house. You invite people over. At this point in time, they were kind of like living still in a nomadic way where they were just like, well, we're in exile, they were in tents. It wasn't permanent. And God is saying, settle down. Settle down. Build a house. If you're going to build a house, that means you have to have an income. That means you have to have a job. That means you have to be working. Work in the economic system which you do not like. Make money. Create a life for you in Babylon. They were definitely not waiting for this. They're waiting for, I'm going to free you, and I'm going to take you back home. Verse 7 says, also seek the peace and prosperity of the city. That word peace and prosperity, that's shalom. And if you research that word, it's a very powerful word. It means a complete wholeness. Every aspect of your life is in line with God. It means that not only is there peace in your life, but in peace in the land around you and the people around you. It means that not only will you prosper, but the people around you will prosper. That means that the Israelites were not only praying for their own safety and protection, they're actually praying that Babylon was peaceful, was safe, that Babylon would prosper, which is completely counter to what they wanted. They wanted justice. If your whole society, your whole life was ripped out from you, and you were then moved to another country where you probably didn't know the language, you didn't know the customs, you didn't know anything, and then you said, okay, this is your new home, you wouldn't want to settle down. You wouldn't want that nation to prosper. But what is God saying? He's saying, pray that the shalom of my presence is there. That's powerful. Because that means that even when you don't understand why you're in the place you're in and why you're in this season, that God is still with you. The last song that we sung, The Reckless Love of God, there's a line that says, when I was your foe, you still fought for me. That even means for us personally. I want to get really personal. When you did not know God, when you were rebelling against him, when you literally didn't want relationship with him, he was still fighting for you. I love that song that we finished with, Reckless Love, because it's all about how his love is so action-based towards you that even before you knew you needed him, he was showing you the way. He was calling you home. One of my favorite parables in the Bible is in Luke when it talks about this prodigal son coming home. Because usually food is always better when it's cooked at home. You can go to other people's houses and you can have meals with them, but the memories of eating food at home are usually strong memories that people have. Now, my mom stopped cooking when we were about 13, but I remember vividly loving my mom's roast beef. I loved it when she cooked roast beef in the slow cooker, and it was just amazing with like the potatoes she did and the carrots and the gravy. It was so good. It was my favorite meal at home. And anytime I had it anywhere else, it was never like it was at home. And it's like God. It's like his love. The food is always better in his house. It always tastes familiar. It always brings back memories. And that's his love for you. It's even when you didn't realize you need it, when you taste it, when you experience it, when you have it, when it touches your lips, all of a sudden it connects with your spirit and it draws you closer in a way that you would never have had that before. So the Israelites are a bit confused because they thought this was going to be the get out of jail, get out of Babylon card, and it's not. It's the build houses, settle down, have kids, live your life. But not only live your life with the peace of God, with the prosperity of God. Verse 8, yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel says, do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord. That means the prophets who were exiled, they were like, I don't want to be here. Let me pray about this. I don't think God wants me to be here. God's going to get us out of here, guys. And how many times when you're uncomfortable, when you're not feeling like, oh, I'm not completely at peace, I'm not completely what I feel like where I should be at in my life, how many times do we kind of God just agrees with our way of thinking? You're like, oh yeah, I should be the wealthiest person in the world and have the biggest house and live on a cliff overlooking the ocean. I should be able to have everything I want and no problems and no issues in my life. Because obviously, wait, yep, God said that. He just said that to me. We do that all the time. We say God has said something when actually it's just a desire of our heart or a dream in our heart, but actually God hasn't spoken it yet. And so these prophets were in exile as well, probably going through the exact same emotional state as everyone else. They're going through the 7 phases of recovery from this. And if they're in denial, if they're in pain, if they're suffering just like anyone else, they'll be like, okay, maybe God is saying he's going to come. And if they're prophets, they would have known the stories. They would have known the Old Testament, which means they would have known the stories of God from before, which was God exiles the Israelites, then God comes and rescues them, and they go back home. And so they're like, it's not far of a stretch to say that this is going to happen, because they know the big story. So like, we're going there. God's going to get us out of here, guys. Don't worry. Don't worry. Then Jeremiah sends them the word of the Lord, and the word of the Lord, stay where you are, get settled down, build a house, have a family, start a job, build community, get connected in, pray for the prosperity of the nation that you're in, even though you hate it, even though they killed the people that you love, settle down. That's not what they're expecting in any way. Verse 10. Then this is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place. 70 years. That means if you were the average lifespan back then, if you were in your teenage years, if you were a child, that meant when you were exiled, you weren't coming back. God is saying, you're going to die in Babylon. You're not going to see the promise in your generation, but your children will, and your children's children will. I was saying earlier about like my dreams. When I thought about my legacy as a person, as an individual, up until I had my son, who's 4 months today, up until I had my son, all of my legacy thoughts were about my lasting impact on the world. And I wanted people to remember the name Chris Long. I wanted my family, my great-grandkids, my great-great-great-grandkids to all remember the name Chris Long and all talk about me. And then I had a son, and I had a baby. And I looked at my baby and I realized, I don't care if they remember me or not, I just want the best for him. And all of a sudden, in my heart, when I had him, I realized something in my heart just unlocked. This extra space I never knew was there. Capacity to love someone outside of you. And I was just like, oh wow, I don't really care if people remember my name. I want the best for Levi. I want the best for my kids now. I'm like, I don't really care if people don't remember Chris Long, because I have a legacy that's bigger than just me. I have a child. I will have children that are from me that I want their life to be so much better than my life. My story of coming back here, I lived in England for almost 10 years. And I went back on a family cruise. My parents sold their house, bought a new house, and we're like, we're going to celebrate. We're going to take the whole family on a family cruise in the Caribbean just before Christmas. Yes. And so we booked our flights. We get on our flights. And I was having some visa troubles. I just hadn't got my permanent residency in England, and I paid for it twice. And I was like, you know what, it's coming. I'm still going to Florida. Go to Florida, go back home. And then I find out while I'm on vacation that the country will kindly not like me to come back for 2.5 years. So I had to quit my job over Skype. I had to pass on. We're pastoring a young adults congregation in Bath at the time in England, and I had to tell them over FaceTime, all of our leaders, hey, we're not coming back. Can't even come back to say goodbye. And it was a huge shock to our system. We knew God was in it, but it was so strange. Why that way, God? Why that way? And I think we can all have moments in your life when something happens and you're like, God, why that way? How many of you have had a why that way moment? Look around, hands up, look around, look at other people, make eye contact. You're not alone. We all have these moments. Why that way? And now we get to verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope in a future. There it is. Saying that at the end, it's a confusing thing to say. For God to say, even though you're going to die in this occupying force, you're going to die in a country that's not your own, you're never going to go back home again. I know the plans I have for you. It is in my plans that you would be in Babylon. Plans to prosper you, plans to give you a hope and a future, that your life, even though you didn't expect it to end this way, is going to end good. Even though you didn't think you're going to get to where you are and be in the place you thought you'd be in, it's going to be good. Your life doesn't have to, you don't have to let circumstance dictate the outcome of your life. You don't have to let what's happening currently dictate it because you think, I should be in a better place. All of us go through this season, I feel, in life and where you wonder, why here, why now? And why am I don't feel part, I don't feel like anyone cares about me. I don't feel like I'm with anybody. I don't feel like I have support. I don't feel like I have the things I need in my life to thrive as a person. Why me? And I want to encourage you that if you're new to this church or you've been coming to this church and you feel like you just attend, you just come here on Sundays and you sit in the same place and you come in, you worship, you hear a talk, and then you pray, and then you leave, and then that's it, and then you have no connection outside of that. I want to encourage you, if you feel like you're in a season where you feel lost, you don't know why you're here, you don't know what's going on, now is a time for you to root down in this church. Now is a time for you to root down in this home, to make this home meaningful to you. Build a house. Have people over. Be vulnerable. When people ask, how are you? Don't you say, yeah, I'm doing great, thanks, and you've had the worst week of your life. That's Canadian politeness. You only find it in Canada. When I lived in England, English culture says you're very abrasive to begin with. They're going to be sarcastic and make fun of the slightest thing about you. And as a Canadian, when I moved to England, it hurt. Because people would make fun of little insecurities and make them big insecurities. And then they'd make it a lasting joke and they'd call you a nickname based off of that. And all the English people are loving life and oh, this is amazing. And I'm feeling really oh, this is really hard. I feel hurt. And then all of a sudden one day you realize you've gotten through the hard exterior and now you found the goo on the inside and you're there from that day forward. They love you no matter what. You could do anything in the world and they would always be there for you. In Canada, it's gooey on the outside, harder on the inside. It's I can hang out with anybody. I could go to a sports game with anyone in the room and get to know you, and it's absolutely fine. But am I going to tell you how I actually feel? Am I going to open up my actual heart and tell you my fears, tell you my worries, tell you what's actually going on? Am I going to be vulnerable about God speaking to me? Am I actually going to expose the real me to you? Or am I going to just project, oh, everything's happy, everything's fine? It's two massive, different cultures. But those cultures are things that I had to really learn. And coming back to Canada, I'm almost here for 2 years being back. I can see how I've started to fall back into Canadian mindsets. Everything's great, everything's happy. Then I get home and I'm just everything's not great, everything's not happy. Why won't someone talk to me? Why won't someone open themselves up to me? Why won't someone be there for me? I want someone to be there for me. And then someone's like, hey, how are you? I'm oh, I'm great, thank you. I don't give them any opportunity to know what's going on, but then I blame them for not pursuing me. I'm oh, if only they pursued me. But I've literally been a brick wall and been hey, how are you? Oh, I'm great, perfect. My life's perfect, see ya. Oh, then I get home, why is life so bad? This is why building a home, settling down, this is why planting a garden, making food, this is what God is saying to the Israelites. He's saying, I want you to live an open life with these people. I want you to be vulnerable with these people. I want the God on the inside of you to come outside of you and everything around you. And people wonder, hey, weren't they exiled here? They're so happy. Can you imagine what that would do to the occupying country? You've exiled them to your foreign land. You think you're going to take them over. They're going to be miserable, and you're going to shove it in their faces every day. And then they see you, and they're hey, how are you? Want to come over for dinner tonight? It would blow their mind. And I want to encourage you today, it doesn't matter what phase of life you're in, there's always something to be thankful for. By showing of hands, how many of you woke up? All of your hands should be up, unless you're asleep in church right now. Some people didn't wake up. Some people didn't wake up this morning. How many of you can stand? Raise your hands. Some people can't stand today. How many can see? Some people can't see today. How many of you have breath in your lungs? Some people don't have that today. You can be thankful for this smallest thing, and God will shine through it. That's why I was at Lake Huron last Sunday with my mother and father-in-law, and I was able to watch Curtis's preach last Sunday, and I loved it because it was like, this is it. It's simple. It's easy. It's a smile. Christians should be the happiest people alive because something on the inside of us differentiates us and gives us a hope in a future that people outside of us that do not know Jesus don't have. That should define us. Why do you always ask me how I'm doing, and when I say I'm fine, you keep on digging until the truth comes out? Why do you open up your house to me and always feed me and ask for nothing back? Why do every week you just smile at me and say hello? Why do you ask the name of your barista when you get a coffee and address them by their name? Why do you do these things that cause you to just be a question to other people? Can everyone stand up for me? Rather than having a moment again where we all come to the front and we all like, I need to be thankful, God. I need to that. Well, I don't want you to come to the front today. I'm going to give you permission to talk to people in church. So I want you to just everyone do a 360 in your seat. Look at the people around you. It's pretty lonely up here, but I'll go down there in a second. Look at the people around you, okay? So in a minute, what I want you to do is I want you to find someone that you don't know. If this is your first time here or you're a guest, I want you to stay with the people that brought you, or if you're here by yourself, find a friendly smile. And this is what you're going to do. I haven't told you what you're going to do, guys. This is what we're going to do. You're going to ask that person for their name. Everyone say their name. You're going to ask them what they do. Say, what do you do? Okay, that's the generic Canadian thing to do. Now you're going to share one thing that you're thankful for. Everyone say, one thing that I'm thankful for. Then what you're going to do, okay, everyone quiet for a second. Everyone quiet. Wow. Talk about losing a room. Okay, after you share the one thing that you're thankful for, what I want you to do is I want you to share one prayer request that you have. One genuine need. And I want you to take one moment and I want you to actually open up to one person about one thing, and they're going to pray for you and you're going to pray for them, okay? All right, I'm going to pray and then we're done. You can go home, you can talk, you can have as much fun as you want, okay? Father, thank you so much for community. I thank you so much for being here with us. And right now, God, I ask that you would come and you would meet with us as we open up, as we're thankful to you for one thing and we share for one thing. God, bless us in Jesus' name. And all God's people shouted, amen.